Welcome to the Stellar Vault. Say hi in the comments to awaken the archive. Then like, subscribe, and let the tale begin.
The sky shattered in silence, and by the time anyone screamed, the Galactic Council was already dead. The rupture opened like a wound in a clear day. One moment, orbital traffic around Velis Prime moved as usual. Shuttles, diplomatic ships, surveyors on routine sweeps. The next, a column of light cut through space, too fast for warning systems to react. It struck the city with precision, erasing it in seconds. Buildings collapsed inward, heat folding metal and glass like paper. The sky flashed white, then turned black. The council domes, treaty halls, and waiting diplomats vanished in an instant. Communication feeds cut off mid-sentence. Screens in remote sectors went to static. Emergency alerts were too late. What signals did escape arrived garbled, delayed, and scattered across distant systems, like fragments of a dying broadcast lost in the dark. Then the signal began to propagate. It came not as a voice, but as law. Simultaneous, translated, impossible to miss. Every public and private receiver on every common band churred and then carried the same cold line in a dozen imperfect tongues. We are the new order. Defy us and be destroyed. Abide and survive. There was no signature that meant anything a council diplomat could read. No ship registry, no ceremonial flag. The syntax of the message was unadorned, modular. Phrases that fit together like mechanical teeth. It was not meant to be argued with. It was meant to be obeyed. Marcus Renner watched the feed unfold on a console that shivered under his palms. He had not been present at the council. Sol had never been invited, not by design. The council's orbit and its graceless deliberations were things humanity read about and catalogued. The loss of life on Velis Prime registered as a military datum first. Scale of destruction, vectors, likely signatures. A diplomat might later interpret horror. Marcus treated it like a case file. He was alone in the observation bay at Lagrange 4, the listening post rigged between Earth and the outer colonies. The room smelled faintly of recycled coffee and cold metal. The bay's glass took the light of the broadcast like a lens, and for a long beat, Renner only listened. The message repeated in 6 variants, then 12, then every common protocol across the feed. Algorithmic translators attempted to normalize grammar. The core remained blunt. "It's woven," said Lieutenant Hera, his voice tight in the calm small space. "Not a speech. A command protocol. Signature fragments align with subroutine structures used in." "In what?" Renner asked. "A language family from the Rhine corridor," Hera admitted. "But fragmented. Someone patched it together from multiple dialects to ensure comprehension. They engineered the vector to cross networks of unrelated topology. They listened as the second wave arrived. This one was military in tone, and the carrier it rode on bore a familiar registry header. Chator High Command. Immediate dispatch. The Chator were one of the warhouses of the Council's outer order. Tall, predatory, and bound by honor as much as blood. When the Council fell and their counselors were among the dead, they didn't hesitate. They went to war. Received. Chator sortie. Engaging New Order fleet over Velis Prime, the packet declared. It listed vectors, ship classes, engagement orders. Then the feed fractured into a field of broken images. A rolling column of Chator dreadnoughts, releasing broadsides into a ring of ships of the ruined capital. The Chator assault was clean and brutal. Their beams scoured the New Order's flank, and for a ragged sequence, it looked as if the ancient Predator class could still bite. Then the Hator sockets blinked and died. The archive feeds showed their ships burning through space like spearheads. Their signal crumpled into black static. A single frame survived long enough to be forwarded through the networks. A V-shaped streak of plasma tearing the sky, and the Gator command signature went dark. No ships retreated, no order of withdrawal. The broadcast pattern ended with a fragment, written in a language that had no courtesy for equivocation. This attack failed, fleet unresponsive. The third message arrived while the first and second still echoed. It was of a different tenor entirely, not a war dispatch, but a timbre. It came from the humming, a Pacific species known for their vocal rituals, their planet a slow set of tides and bell-like structures. The humming spoke in choir, and their transmissions were normally full of layered resonances that human translators collapsed into approximations. This transmission began as a series of harmonics, like someone tuning a giant instrument. Then a translated token. Submission. They had not been obliterated. Their world's header was intact. Their transmission was not a cry, but an offering. We will abide. The clip that spread was a simple sequence. Citizen gatherings, the tuning of vocal pipes, leaders stepping forward and bowing their heads as a chorus flooded their civic canals. By the end of the loop, the humming's signature shifted from melody to silence, and then a recorded message in 3 languages. We will comply. Renner watched all 3 in sequence, the execution of the council, and Hathor fleet attempting to respond and being cut off like a limb, and a humming choir bending itself into concession. The threads braided into a single fact. The new order was not merely powerful, it was decisive and mechanized to the point of cruelty. It was not interested in sparring. It wanted an order. He felt, in the joint between shoulder and collarbone, the small rise of a pressure he had come to recognize as history pivoting. The old safety that had hung across the galaxy, the Council's slow, bureaucratic guardrail, had been erased. The new order had shown, in minutes, that treaties were paper, and power was the only thing that lasted. Messages came at Lagrange, 4 by the dozen. Traders called, asking if it had been an attack on behalf of a rival house. Scholars pinged with requests for raw telemetry. Colony governors wanted to know the risk assessment. The outer stations, where markets ran on routes the Council had once policed, requested immediate instructions. Renner sent none. We weren't invited, he told Lieutenant Hara. The phrase was a small thing. It contained a lot. Sol was not among the Stewardship Council that had met in Velis Prime. That omission had kept Earth out of many wars. It had kept their conscription low and their coffers unspent on distant political graces. For the first time since the fleets had been catalogued, that omission felt like a shield. Do we have any reason to respond? Hara asked. He looked at the falling packets, at the Hathor frame, at the humming's bowed chorus. We have reasons to watch, he said, and to ready. The listening post began to spool raw feeds for archival. Copies went to secure vaults not for distribution, but for analysis. History had provided a lesson. The first watchers often learned last. They would not be the same this time. Night crossed the Earth-facing hemisphere, and the Arkhangelsk vault under Siberia glowed in its concrete dark, like an old wound. Far beneath permafrost and data clusters, the vault hummed, secure, deep, and cold enough to slow anything that attempted to think its way through the walls. Colonel Saito stood at the central rack, the only man above the age the younger analysts could name definitively. He had a map of the new feeds in his head. He had commanded logistical runs through 3 minor uprisings and a smuggling incident now that had run a week with none of the old protections. Now he had at his throat the sound of civilizations folding. "Run pattern overlay," he ordered. The consoles accepted his voice without surprise. The analytic engine parsed the New Order broadcast across languages, the Chator metadata, and the harmonic submission of the humming. It produced a histogram and then a list of probabilities. Attack vectors, likely fleet signatures, likely staging corridors. Dr. Wei Juno, no title abbreviation, sat opposite him, sleeves rolled, expression the same steady blank as always. He had been the mind behind more than one quiet salvage of older tech. He was the man the military sent when something had to be made to do what it had never been designed for. His hands flew across a tablet, overlaying the New Order vector with old intelligence. "They moved faster than any registered fold gate," he said. "The energy profile looks like engineered phase slipping. They mask their approach and then publish their presence as a rule." Saito let the thought settle. They broadcast to intimidate. That's clear. They wanted everyone to see the consequence. Wei nodded. "And the Chator strike. We have a blind spot on their strike," Saito finished. "The Chator went active, and their signature was scrubbed in situ. That suggests a suppression method we haven't fully characterized." "Exactly," Wei said. "Suppression plus annihilation. Structural erasure on a planetary scale. Their motive pattern aligns with expansion through terror." Colonel Saito pressed his fingers to his forehead. "Tell me what to do." Wei gave him a slow, clinical look. "Don't answer." "We aren't going to be cowards," Saito said, "but we aren't going to stab in the dark." "Observation, then preparation," Wei said. "We catalog, reverse, and if necessary, respond with precision. Humans learn. That's what scares predators. They expect empire. They don't expect evolution in a day." Saito mocked a breath through his teeth and said, "We've 32 hours before the New Order reaches the outer fringe lines, if they aim for our corridor. Time enough to make a choice, show ourselves, or make them guess." They set the engine to work. Archives duplicated, counter-signatures compiled. In quiet feeds, they began to test old defensive arrays they kept in reserve. Railgun nodes, rusty from disuse. Magnetic grapples refitted as scatter traps. The ghosted hulls of scavenged freighters, prepped to die with purpose. Outside, the world spun under a sky that no longer offered consolation. Across the colonies, analog transmissions and private channels went dark as sovereign houses severed connections. Merchants with credits parked in neutral vaults reached for phoneways. Young soldiers in the fringe were issued sudden orders. Private research facilities began shipping encrypted crates under cover of night. The galaxy's quiet commerce, once stabilized by the Council's soft rules, moved like a creature sensing tremors. By morning, every feat in the Arkhangelsk stack was redlined. Wei handed Saito a list of estimates and the name of a corridor. "If they test us," he said, tapping the map, "they will test here." Saito folded the paper carefully and looked at the file labeled New Order, Cultivation Pattern. "What do we tell them?" he asked. Wei hesitated a fraction, then gave the only honest answer they had built policy for. "We tell nothing. We make them guess." A message went out anyway, not a public broadcast. A secure packet reached a handful of private contacts scattered across friendly systems. Physicists, shipwrights, retired captains who still kept crews. The note was terse, no ceremony. "Hunkering? Number. Reconfiguration. You know what to do." And when the glass in the Arkhangelsk observation window fogged with the breath of the men inside, when the outer sky above the frozen Earth simply continued to spin. Colonel Saito allowed himself the smallest of smiles. It was not a smile of triumph. It was a human calculation, the knowledge that they had not been counted and had therefore not yet been used. Someone might blink first. The new order had begun to watch. Humanity watched back. They would not be easy prey. The sky was burning when humanity stayed silent. Across Earth's upper atmosphere, satellites blinked out one by one, cut clean by precision unknown, their fragments left to burn like fireflies over sleeping continents. The world never saw it coming. But somewhere beneath the quiet, someone had been expecting it. Marcus Renner stared at the wall screen inside the command bunker, buried 3 kilometers beneath Greenland's rock shelf. The playback looped again, the transmission repeating in every known tongue. Alien. Cold. Certain. We are the new order. Defy it and be destroyed. Your only option is abide. The audio was stripped of malice. There was no need for tone when certainty followed behind it like gravity. Renner folded his arms, jaw set. What's the public story? Colonel Saito stood behind him, still in his cold weather gear, frost melting off his gloves. Faulty solar flare disrupted high-band satellite grid. We've pulled news chatter back to local server loops. No global feeds. All Tier 1 analysts are being routed to deep systems. Renner turned slightly. And the Shator? Did they try anything else? Saito exhaled. Exactly what we feared. They jumped in hard. Full fleet strength. 4 minutes of engagement. Then, silence. He paused. After their fleet was wiped, the Hator as a species went dark. No transmissions, no retaliation. Just gone. Renner didn't blink. Then they won't try again. Saito nodded once. Confirmed. No further military action followed, but the new order continued broadcasting the same demand. Did we answer them? Renner asked. No, said Dr. Wei Juno, emerging from a side corridor with a data tablet in hand. We went dark. Hara, now uniformed, moved to stand behind Renner. He said nothing. He didn't need to. The silence had been the response. The facility known as Deep Null didn't appear on any chart. Built inside a dead glacial rift during the late cold orbit period, it existed for one reason. What happened here was never supposed to exist. Each sublevel lit independently. Power was drawn from thermal vents buried deep in the crust. Nothing was allowed to emit radiation past the hull line. Communication was shortwave, line of sight only. The further below you went, the older the systems got, and the harder it was to track. In sub-level 12, Hara watched as engineers detached guidance cores from a class of stealth corvettes long mothballed after the Treaty of Anchorage. The ships weren't fast. They weren't well armed. But they were ghosts. And ghosts made good messengers. We're prepping 6? Hara asked. 8, said Wei, tapping the manifest. 2 are unmarked. Bare metal, no transponder. Courier class, no return vector. They're not meant to come back? They're meant to disappear. Neither man spoke. The silence said enough. Further south, in the airless void just above Earth's shadow band, one of the Black Sun-class stealth ships detached from the old orbital cemetery, where it had been hidden among decades of debris. For 20 years it had drifted without a pulse, just a number on a long-dead list. Now its engines shivered back to life, quietly, slowly, just enough for drift correction. Operation Threshold had begun. Each Black Sun ship carried no insignia, no crew roster filed. No origin code that matched Earth's defense net. They were relics of a time when Earth had been considered paranoid. Now, paranoia had become protocol. Inside the command chamber, Marcus Renner reviewed the status uplinks from Deep Null. Field units were being rerouted through subterranean links. Lunar outposts had gone dark, by choice, not destruction. No light, no sound, no digital trace. Saito stood nearby. They'll notice we're silent. Renner nodded. That's the point. By the third day, the pattern had changed. In the space between stars, survey drones launched from the fringe colonies began blinking offline. Not attacked, not jammed. Simply gone. By the fifth day, a private corporation mining orbitals near Saturn lost contact with their tether crew. Emergency beacons fired. Rescue shuttles deployed. Nothing found. And yet, Earth said nothing. When the New Order broadcast again, the message had changed. You are silent, but your systems move. Your outposts shift. This is not submission. No reply was sent. Instead, 25 independent platforms went dark within the hour. Cargo ships vanished from established lanes. Tracking markers turned to static. Trade terminals reported software anomalies. GPS data scrambled. Civilian systems rerouted to manual fallback. Earth had gone invisible, not defenseless, just absent. In a sector far from Earth, deep inside a dead zone between spiral arms, a long-exiled species reactivated a dormant jump gate. The Vor, non-aligned, fractured, clever in the way viruses are clever, had once been purged for code violations no one could ever fully prove. Then, without prompt or preamble, a transmission reached Deep Null. It was untraceable. It simply said, "We observed. The enemy is pattern-bound. We offered deception. Use it well." Attached was a data stream, algorithms designed to mimic hostile fleet signatures, forged from hybrid models and seeded with false engagement vectors. A synthetic playbook, fully operational, fully deniable. A ghost fleet. A story, written in plasma trails and forged telemetry, designed not to win, but to mislead. In Deep Null, Colonel Saito reviewed the packet before it was handed off to a Black Sun courier. Coordinates, vector intercepts, simulated formations seeded to suggest multiple incursions into New Order-controlled space. Renner signed off on the dispatch. "Let them chase shadows," he said. Wei Juno looked up. "And if they don't?" Renner shrugged. "Then they're not predators. Just tyrants with a telescope." Far beyond the lunar wreck fields, drones stitched a mirrored shell into the black. It had no signal, no engine, no propulsion of its own. But it was growing. The New Order had taken the Council in one strike. But Earth had not been part of that council. And humans did not shout when the knife came out. They sharpened theirs. In the dark and waited. The Vor didn't speak with voices. They responded with patterns. 6 days after Earth vanished behind silence and shadow, a second transmission reached Deep Null. Narrowband, recursive locked, no traceable origin. It unpacked itself across vacuum-insulated cores, silent, clean, and without ceremony. Pattern, extinction accelerates. Pattern, mimicry is insufficient. Pattern, escalation requires subversion. Dr. Wei Juno stood beside the cold screen array, watching the phrases emerge from raw logic syntax. The Vor didn't explain. They observed, calculated, adapted. We act not in allegiance. We act to defer similarity of outcome. Your silence cloaks our own. This is sufficient. Renner read the final line aloud. Not allies, he said. Just other ghosts behind the same wall. Wei nodded. The Vor saw the council burn, the humming bow, the Shator vanish. They're counting forward again, and they still don't like the number. From the packet came 3 payloads. The first was a camouflaged protocol, a signal obfuscation layer designed to sit inside any standard transmission chain. We're calling it the submission layer, Wei explained, feeding it into simulation. It rides the transmission, masks it, in compliance. Lies on our behalf. Renner understood immediately. It tells them we're kneeling, even while we're sharpening knives. The second was more elusive, a ghost fleet protocol. Low-frequency signatures designed to animate old wrecks and cold hulls. Metal without crew. Motion without purpose. Debris fields turned to decoys. Operation Phantom Gate, Wei said. We expand immediately. These fleets won't fight. They'll just confuse the sky. The third payload took longer to parse. Not a language, not code. A logic scaffold. An abstract map of how the new order processed input. Wei stared at the array as it rendered. No grammar, he said. Just decision structure. When it reacts, when it waits, when it burns. Renner leaned closer. We know how it thinks. Saito stepped in. We have their gifts. One that hides, one that misleads, and one that listens. No guns, Renner said. Wei didn't look up. No, just weapons they don't have names for. The Vor sent nothing further. No follow-up, no instructions. Their silence returned. Pattern match. Completed. Their contribution was made. Far beyond Earth's orbital shadow, Black Sun 07 deployed a full ghost echo signature into the Eridani drift corridor. 70 hulls spun into a false burn, dead metal masquerading as intent. New Order satellites pivoted to intercept. Meanwhile, the real Earthbound fleets changed direction, unseen. On the 4th day, a New Order probe entered the Sol system fringe. It detected 1 planetary signal chain collapsed, 10 orbital stations cold, no sign of resistance, and a hostile fleet formation, a false burn accelerating into deep space. It turned to follow. Inside Deep Null, Hara monitored the fallback fields. Civilian networks remained offline. No chatter, no panic. The blackout held. A ping arrived from Trinity Station. Clean, coded. A Vor node carrier had passed a New Order checkpoint under submission layer cover. Invisible. Undetected. They didn't see it, Hara said quietly. Renner stared at the status board. How long can we play this game? Wei folded his arms. As long as they believe we've already lost. Saito said nothing. He just watched the stars rotate across the overhead feed. And on the dark side of the moon, the mirrored array continued to grow. Unmapped, unarmed, unreadable. But not unseen. The New Order had rewritten the galaxy in a single broadcast. Earth was writing its answer. In silence, in ghosts. And with the Allies, no one had counted. The silence didn't last. For 6 days, Earth's deception held. The Vor's mimic fleet scattered across known space, and the submission layer continued to whisper false compliance across monitored channels. No signals returned. No warnings came. Just the illusion of victory. Then, without ceremony, the sky shifted. The New Order stopped watching. Their next transmission wasn't a threat. It was a vector. A three-point strike. An inner arm assault vector slicing toward the Lagrange nets. A wedge of carriers bound for the outer moons. And a veil of micro-constructs dissolving through sensor noise like rain through a grate. No warning. No law. Just motion. Fast, surgical, and full of certainty. In deep null, alarms triggered before the message fully decoded. "They've shifted patterns," Wei said, his voice flat. "They're done waiting." Renner didn't look up. "Then we make them regret moving first." Deep null lit in response. "We have contact across Grid 5, Hara said. He kept his voice even. Beside him, Wei fed the Vor scaffold into the targeting matrix. "They're coming hard." Renner watched live feeds spool into the holotable. Ghost echo signatures flared where the Vor had laid them. False fleets, spinning false exhaust. New Order command nodes rotated to engage the decoys. For a beat, Earth's gambit looked like it would work. The enemy peeled a third of its striking force toward empty corridors of space. Then the real attack began. From beyond the mapped edge, a chain of black shapes uncoiled, slipping through patched folds in space the New Order had learned to hide behind. They were not all the same design. Some were latticed, crystalline gray. Others looked like warped cylinders, wrapped in living metal. They dove for the moon field, where Earth's mirrored array and hidden rail nodes were still incomplete. The first impact was local and brutal. A carrier's point salvo hit a radar tower. The structure did not explode so much as vanish. A lattice of towers and wiring collapsing into a bloom of light and metal. The air above the colony turned to ash. "Tower 3's gone," a comms tech called. "We're at 70% sensor integrity." Saito moved without hesitation. "Seal the fallback nets. Bring Phantom Gate online. Block the lanes. Don't let them see through to the real systems." His command was economy itself. The crew broke into motion. Down on the Black Sun platforms, pilots wrestled to light ancient drives into life. Hara keyed the launch sequence for the stealth corvettes labeled ghosts in the manifest, but killers in practice. "Black Sun Flight, Vector Alpha," he ordered. "Cut the harness and make them chase smoke." The first dogfight was less choreography than a shove. Small, fast human interceptors dove between girded escorts, weaving through columns of energy like swimmers between tides. The New Order's micro-constructs were fast and cold. They matched maneuvers with a precision that suggested learning mid-combat. A human wing lost 3 hulls inside 10 minutes. Their debris glowed, white and sorrowful, as if the night itself had been scored. Wei's console pinged. "The submission layer's propagating," he said. "It's hitting command subnodes now. Pockets of anomalous compliance." "Can we amplify it?" Renner asked. "We can try." Wei's hands moved. The Vor scaffold began writing small, lawful lies into the enemy's control fabric. A delayed auth here, a redundant checksum there. The virus didn't fight. It nudged. The first real fracture came when a New Order destroyer mistook its escort pattern. Its formation tightened, and then, without warning, a line of its drones opened fire on its own flank. Fire crossed metal like lightning. In the hollows, the destroyer's signature wavered. Command began to feed contradictory orders as the scaffold introduced tiny contradictions the enemy's logic could not easily reconcile. "Now," Renner said. Across the killing field, the humans struck where the New Order hesitated. Black Sun corvettes slipped under radiance fields, firing silent charges. cold bolts that punched through armor and left ships with smoking ribs. Rail nodes hidden in the debris belt answered, their beams pulling a strut from a cruiser's spine. Human freighters, turned to battering rams and missile spits, rammed the flanks of larger vessels and detonated hull charges that sprayed shrapnel and telemetry into the void. But the New Order had depth. Fleet after fleet kept coming. A lattice core, a command construct of impossible scale, drifted into range, tearing open local space with waves that cleaved shields like paper. Human carriers lost flight decks. Crews were vaporized by slices of code manifesting as matter. Among the chaos, the Vor's ghost echoes found their cruelest use, decoys that lured a New Order fleet into an ambush corridor. A squadron, fooled by a phantom signal crafted from Vor algorithms, flew straight into the path of human cruisers erupting from stasis fields. The engagement turned. The predators became prey. Still, every advantage found a cost. The Sasquatch-class interceptor that broke a carrier's flank never reported home. Railgun cores melted and had to be replaced with improvised capacitors. Fuel stores took hits. Cities on the dark side burned as microstrikes found weak domes, and micro-constructs came close enough to seed demolitions. On the holotable, Renner watched casualty markers bloom. Each flash was measured, not melodramatic. He had not come here to count heroes. He had come here to keep a species breathing. The tide turned where the virus burned deepest. A New Order net anchored in a command ring began to fragment. Nodes dropped offline, then blinked back with corrupted priorities. A carrier, mid-translation, opened its bays not to weapons, but to a cascade of false emergency signals. The scaffolding had injected scripts that forced redundancies. The carrier's crew could not sort the noise from the threat. Command latency ballooned to seconds. In fleet combat, seconds were death or salvation. "Push the Phantom Gate to full output," Wei ordered. "Focus the echo arrays on the lattice core. Make it chase ghosts." They did. The lattice core, starved of certainty, diverted beams into a corridor of ghost signatures. Human strike teams hit the core's flanks while its attention was misapplied. The core's armor began to bloom with fractures. Then the worst happened. A micro-construct swarm found the mirrored array. They swarmed a naked node and began to disrupt assembly. The array's growth stuttered, metal plates tearing away like dead leaves. Engineers aboard repair clambered into vacuum to reattach panels. A human shuttle took a glancing blow. Its hull sheared open, and 3 technicians were lost to the void. "The array is bleeding," Saito said. The word cut clean. Renner's answer was a simple constraint. "Hold it." "Keep the feed live. If we lose the mirror, we can't buy the interval." They held. They bled. The New Order learned, in those sharp hours, that obedience could be faced, and that a mimic could be more dangerous than a foe. The scaffold kept grafting doubt into their nets. Ships that had once moved together like instruments in a choir began to lag, tire, and finally falter. When the dawn came, it came over a field of wreckage. The New Order still waited at the edges of mapped space, but its formations thinned. The lattice core limped. Its escort numbers were down by nearly half. A carrier burned quietly as its engines died. Deep Null did not celebrate. Renner watched the final feeds and felt only the inventory of cost. "We made them hesitate," he said. "That's all we needed." Wei nodded. "They've learned not to trust their certainty. That change is contagious." Hara turned from the screen. "They'll come back. he said. They will, Saito agreed, and next time they will bring other things. Renner regarded the dots of light and ruin. Then we take the next thing away from them tomorrow. Outside, the mirrored array gleamed. Patched, imperfect, but functional. Across the dark, Vor ghost fleets continued their deception, trailing false fire and spectral signatures through corridors no longer safe. The New Order had not been stopped, but it had been slowed. And for the first time since the sky shattered, the war no longer belonged only to them. 55 cycles had passed since the mirror array flared and the New Order turned away. In Earth reckoning, it had been 10 months, just long enough for stars to forget. But no one forgot. Across the fractured lanes of the Orion Spur, 3 flags now flew, where once there had been only human ships. They flew without color, without emblems. No banners, just presence, formation, signal, trust. Humanity was not alone now, and the silence was about to end. They came without fanfare. Thylan engineers arrived first, their ships pulsing with quiet blue light. Days later, the Sirine drifted in on sails of refracted gravity, their vessels bending the dark like water. The Vasker followed, 3 warholes, scarred and silent, settling into formation above the planet, as if they'd always belonged there. Low orbit around Earth no longer looked like war. It looked like purpose. Once scarred battle stations had become cradle docks, rearmed with Thylan resonance plating. Refitted ships bore Sirine graviton filaments braided along their hulls. Their engines curved in ways human metal had never been asked to bend. And inside those hulls, Vasker helix coils hummed like caged lightning. Fed by fuel loops, cooled through the spines of armor-bred predators, now sworn to human command. At the center of it all was Nexus 1, Earth's first hybrid fleet platform. Not a station, a decision engine. Inside its central command dome, Colonel Saito watched projection markers bloom across a 3D star map. Confirmed phase distortion along 3 sectors, Lieutenant Hera said. New Order activity in the Jalos cluster. Same pattern. Correction through annihilation. No survivors. They're finishing their work, said Wei Juno, hands folded. Cleaning the far quadrant before turning back to us. They think we'll wait, Saito said. Marcus Renner stepped into the dome, silent until now. We won't. Hours later, Renner gathered the allies in the strategy hall. 3 voices shared the floor, crystalline tones from the Thylan Accord, fluid harmonics from the Sirine Compact, and the grating pulse chatter of Vaskir war code. No translation needed, not after 10 months of shared work. Renner stood at the center of the tactical chamber, human, unarmored, but not uncertain. 10 months ago, he said, we disappeared. We watched. We built. Now we bring this war to them. A Thalan emissary shimmered beside him, light refracting through partially translucent skin. We have crafted ships that pulse with response. Strike them, and they will sing. A Sirine fleet path mistress floated nearby in her aquatic harness. Our sails are ready. We will ride ahead of your weapons and pull space open for your fire. A Vaskir war captain tilted his head once. We bleed forward. Just give the word. Renner gave it. Then we strike first. Then the Operation Eidolon began, and it began with a lie. In the dark between galaxies, far from the New Order's known holdings, a ghost fleet launched from the bones of old solar graves. The Ghost Echoes protocol had evolved. Entire false armadas moved as bait, mimicking aggression just beneath the line of provocation. Their signals were scattered, chaotic, just faulty enough to trigger surveillance patterns. They didn't say fight us. They said, watch us fail. And the New Order turned. It always turned when control was at risk. But this time, the real fleet was already in motion. 2 jumps ahead, hidden behind a Sirina distortion veil. Every ship equipped with hybrid resonance cores, calibrated to mimic surrender until the moment of strike. They struck at Draith Core, once rich in silicates, now hollowed and re-engineered into a broadcast nexus. Draith had become one of the New Order's central command relays. Logic trees pulsed through its relays, issuing protocols to far-off systems. All of that ended in a moment. 3 waves emerged from folded space. Sirine scouts bent graviton currents, scattering their signals into hundreds of phantom traces. Vaskir breaching hulls slammed through outer defenses, spinning helix bombardments until shield matrices folded. Human and Thaylen battle platforms held the center, coated in resonance plating, absorbing the first fire and sending it back with twice the force. Inside the relay, the New Order began to recalculate. Too late. Wei Juno stood aboard the Cavant, Earth's tactical carrier, as the Vor scaffold activated. The synthetic protocol didn't corrupt. It mimicked. It showed the New Order what it wanted to see. To their sensors, the fleet still looked compliant, ships holding to expected paths, signals normal, until they weren't. The moment of silence came, then broke. Command patterns frayed. Recognition collapsed. Then came the explosions. The Draith relay began to fracture. Ships caught between decision trees lost time, and time was death. The Sirine collapsed space behind the retreating vectors. The Thalin bent enemy fire back through mirrored cores. Vaskir interceptors raced down broken escape lines, ignoring return vectors until nothing remained to pursue. Renner watched it all from orbit. "We just cut their command finger off," Saito said over comms. "No," Renner replied. "We just proved it can bleed." After Draith, more species came. Some arrived in warships patched from scrap. Others brought only whispers and data cores. But they came, not to surrender, not to hide, but to fight. The silence from the New Order lasted 30 cycles. They did not retaliate. They did not pursue. They simply held the systems they had already claimed. And then, without warning, without message, without demands, the New Order fleets left the galaxy. No trace, no trail, no signal left behind. But no one believed it was over. Not really. Earth's new allies took the withdrawal as a sign of weakness, a break in the machine's will. But Marcus Renner didn't share their optimism. An enemy like the New Order didn't flinch. It didn't pull back. It didn't retreat. It waited. And so humanity prepared. They sharpened what had once been shadows. They built weapons with no names. They mapped the dark and seeded it with teeth. Renner knew it was only a matter of time, but time was the one thing they had bought, and time was all he needed.